Welcome to a story of war, a story of courage, and a story of sacrifice. This is not just history. This is the reality of the Vietnam War, where millions of lives were changed forever. The world after World War II. The story of the Vietnam War begins in the shadow of another massive conflict, World War II. When the war ended in 1945, the world was divided into two powerful camps. The United States, capitalism, democracy. The Soviet Union, communism. This tension became known as the Cold War. The United States feared one thing above all, the spread of communism. Vietnam under colonial rule. Vietnam was not always independent. For decades, it had been controlled by France. After World War II, a revolutionary leader named Ho Chi Minh declared Vietnam independent in 1945. But France refused to let go. This led to a First Indochina War, the fall of French power. In 1954, everything changed at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. Vietnamese forces defeated France. Colonial rule collapsed. A new future began. The war ended with the Geneva Accords. Vietnam was divided into North Vietnam Communist, South Vietnam Anti-Communist. This division was supposed to be temporary. America steps in. The United States believed in the domino theory. If one country becomes communist, others will follow. So, America supported South Vietnam to stop the spread. Key leader in South Vietnam, Ngo Dinh Diem. But Diem's government was corrupt, unpopular, oppressive. This created anger among the people. Rise of the Viet Cong. In South Vietnam, a resistance group formed, Viet Cong. They used guerrilla tactics, ambush attacks, hidden tunnels, surprise warfare. They were supported by North Vietnam. The Gulf of Tonkin Incident. In 1964, a major turning point occurred, the Gulf of Tonkin Incident. The U.S. claimed its ships were attacked. This led to full military involvement, massive troop deployment. President Lyndon B. Johnson escalated the war. 7. American soldiers in Vietnam. Thousands turned into hundreds of thousands. At its peak, over 500,000 U.S. troops in Vietnam. Soldiers faced dense jungles, booby traps, guerrilla warfare. Weapons used, napalm, Agent Orange. The war became brutal and confusing. Life in the Jungle War. This wasn't a normal war. The enemy was invisible. Villagers could be fighters. Allies could turn into enemies. American soldiers struggled with fear, heat, uncertainty. The Tet Offensive. In 1968, the war changed forever. The Tet Offensive. Massive surprise attack by North Vietnam and Viet Cong. Attacks across South Vietnam. Even though the U.S. fought back successfully, it shocked the nation. War comes home to America. Back in the U.S., people began protesting. Major issues, high casualties, no clear victory, media coverage showing brutal reality. Young Americans protested the war. The My Lai Massacre, one of the darkest moments. The My Lai Massacre, U.S. soldiers killed hundreds of unarmed civilians. President Nixon and Vietnamization. In 1969, Richard Nixon became president. His plan? Reduce U.S. troops. Let South Vietnam handle the war. This was called Vietnamization. Expanding the war. Despite reducing troops, Nixon expanded the war into Cambodia, Laos. This caused more protests in the U.S. The fall of Saigon. In 1975, the war ended dramatically. The capital of South Vietnam, Saigon, fell to North Vietnamese forces. This event is known as Fall of Saigon. Vietnam became one unified communist country. The cost of the war. The Vietnam War caused millions of Vietnamese deaths. Over 58,000 American soldiers killed. Massive destruction. It left deep scars. Impact on America. The war changed the United States forever. Distrust in government. Strong anti-war movements. New military strategies. It became one of the most controversial wars in U.S. history. Psychological impact. Soldiers returned home with trauma, PTSD, emotional scars. Many struggled to adapt. Lessons of the Vietnam War. The war taught important lessons. Military power doesn't guarantee victory. Public opinion matters. Understanding local culture is crucial. Why it still matters today. The Vietnam War still influences U.S. foreign policy, military decisions, global politics. It is studied worldwide. Final reflection. The Vietnam War was not just a battle of armies. It was a war of ideology, a war of fear. Part 2. Fire, Fear, and Fracture. Into the Fire, the Reality of Combat. By the late 1960s, Vietnam was no longer just a distant conflict. It was a living nightmare for American soldiers. Young men, many barely 18 or 19, were dropped into a world they didn't understand. Thick jungles that hid enemies, silent villages with uncertain loyalties, nights filled with fear, gunfire, and confusion. The enemy, the Viet Cong, didn't fight like a traditional army. They blended into the population. They struck without warning. And then, they vanished. The Tunnel War. Beneath the ground, a hidden world existed. The Viet Cong built massive underground tunnel systems like Ho Chi tunnels. These tunnels were living quarters, supply routes, hospitals, escape paths. American soldiers called tunnel rats had to crawl inside, in total darkness, surrounded by traps, facing enemies at point-blank range. It was one of the most terrifying parts of the war. The jungle as an enemy. Vietnam's environment was as deadly as the war itself. Heat and humidity drained energy. Monsoon rains flooded camps. Insects spread disease. Military used chemicals like Agent Orange to destroy jungle cover. But this caused severe health problems, birth defects, long-term environmental damage, air war, power from the sky. The United States had overwhelming air power. Operations like Operation Rolling Thunder dropped millions of tons of bombs on North Vietnam. Planes roared across the skies. Bombers, fighter jets, helicopters. The helicopter became the symbol of the war, inserting troops, evacuating the wounded, flying into danger again and again. The Ho Chi Minh Trail. Despite heavy bombing, North Vietnam kept supplying its forces. How? Through a secret network, Ho Chi Minh Trail. It stretched through jungles and mountains. Even with constant attacks, it never fully stopped. This frustrated U.S. forces. Soldiers' mental struggle. The biggest battle wasn't always physical, it was mental. American soldiers faced fear of unseen enemies, moral confusion, loss of friends. Many began to question, why are we even here? Protest movement explodes. Back home, the war sparked massive protests. Students, activists, and even veterans spoke out. Major protests included college campus demonstrations, anti-war marches in Washington, D.C. One tragic moment, the Kent State shootings. National Guard soldiers opened fire on students protesting the war. This shocked the nation. Media changes everything. For the first time, war entered people's living rooms. Television showed dead soldiers, burning villages, crying civilians. Journalists like Walter Cronkite began questioning the war. When he expressed doubt, millions of Americans started to rethink everything. The Pentagon Papers. In 1971, a secret was revealed. The Pentagon Papers showed the government had misled the public. The war was far more complicated than reported. Trust in leadership collapsed. Prisoners of war. Many American soldiers were captured. They were held in harsh conditions in North Vietnam. Famous prison, Hanoi Hilton. Prisoners endured torture, isolation, psychological pressure. Yet many showed incredible resilience. Vietnamization fails. President Richard Nixon tried to shift responsibility to South Vietnam. But problems remained. Weak leadership, poor morale, dependence on U.S. support. As American troops withdrew, South Vietnam became vulnerable. The Easter Offensive. In 1972, North Vietnam launched a major attack, the Easter Offensive. It was a full-scale invasion. South Vietnam struggled to hold its ground, even with U.S. air support. Peace talks began. Negotiations took place in Paris. After years of fighting, both sides were exhausted. This led to Paris Peace Accords. Key points: U.S. troops withdrew, prisoners were released, fighting was supposed to stop. But peace didn't last. The final collapse. Without U.S. support, South Vietnam weakened quickly. In 1975, North Vietnam launched its final push. Cities fell one by one. The last helicopter. The world watched one unforgettable moment. Helicopters evacuating people from rooftops in Saigon. Desperate crowds tried to escape. It was chaos, it was heartbreak, it was the end. The war ends. On April 30th, 1975, fall of Saigon. South Vietnam surrendered. Vietnam was unified under communist rule. Aftermath in Vietnam. The country faced devastation, poverty, rebuilding challenges. Many fled as refugees. They became known as boat people. Aftermath in America. The United States faced deep wounds. Veterans struggled to reintegrate. Public trust in government declined. The military changed its strategies. The war became a symbol of failure, sacrifice, hard lessons. Cultural impact. The Vietnam War shaped American culture. Movies like Apocalypse Now, music protesting war, literature and documentaries. It became a powerful part of history. Final words, Part 2 ending. The Vietnam War was not just about victory or defeat. It was about human endurance, political mistakes, the cost of ideology. It showed the world even the strongest power can be humbled. Part 3. The human cost. A soldier's first day. The helicopter blades spun loudly as young American soldiers landed in Vietnam. For many, this was their first time leaving home. They stepped into blazing heat, thick jungle air, a land completely unfamiliar. There were no clear front lines, no obvious enemy, just tension everywhere. The draft, forced into war. Not every soldier chose to fight. Many were sent through the draft system. Young men across America feared one thing: will my number be called? Some tried to avoid it. Some accepted it. Some never came back. Brotherhood in battle. In Vietnam, soldiers formed deep bonds. They trusted each other more than anyone else. Because in war, your friend is your survival. Your team is your family. When one fell, it wasn't just loss, it was heartbreak. The fear of the unknown. The enemy wasn't always visible. The Viet Cong used hidden traps, sudden ambushes, night attacks. A quiet village by day could become a battlefield by night. Booby traps and silent death. The jungle was filled with deadly surprises. Punji stick traps, hidden explosives, tripwires. One wrong step, and everything could end. This constant fear broke many soldiers mentally. Letters from home. Soldiers waited for one thing more than anything else. Letters. From mothers, from wives, from loved ones. These letters brought hope, comfort, a reminder of home. But sometimes, letters stopped coming. And silence hurt more than bullets. The Vietnamese civilians, caught in the middle, were innocent people. Farmers, children, families. They faced bombings, displacement, fear from both sides. They didn't choose the war, but they suffered the most. Villages destroyed to fight the Viet Cong. U.S. forces sometimes destroyed villages suspected of helping them. This created anger among locals, more support for the enemy. It became a tragic cycle. Child soldiers and war trauma. Some fighters were just children. Young boys carried weapons. Young girls acted as messengers or spies. War stole their childhood. Psychological breakdown. Many soldiers reached a breaking point. They experienced panic attacks, emotional numbness, confusion. Some turned to alcohol, drugs, to escape the reality around them. The role of music. Music became a powerful escape. Songs from artists like Jimi Hendrix, Bob Dylan, reflected pain, protest, the spirit of the time. Music gave voice to emotions soldiers couldn't express. Women in the war. Women played critical roles: nurses, journalists, support staff. They witnessed horrific injuries, endless suffering, yet they showed incredible courage. The war through a camera. Photographers captured moments that shocked the world. One famous image, the Napalm Girl. It showed the true horror of war. These images changed public opinion. Returning home. When soldiers came back to America, things weren't as they expected. Instead of a hero's welcome, many faced criticism, protest, isolation. They felt forgotten, misunderstood. PTSD, the invisible wound. Many veterans suffered from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Symptoms included nightmares, flashbacks, anxiety. This was a battle that continued long after the war ended. Broken families. War didn't just affect soldiers. Families back home suffered too. Wives waiting endlessly, parents losing sons, children growing up without fathers. The emotional cost was enormous. Refugees and escape. After the war, thousands of Vietnamese fled their country. They escaped by sea, facing storms, pirates, starvation. They became known as the Boat People. The Veterans Memorial. Years later, America honored its fallen soldiers. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial was built. It carries over 58,000 names. Each name tells a story. Each name represents a life lost. Healing a divided nation. The war divided America deeply. But over time, people began to heal. Veterans were recognized. History was studied. Still, the scars remain. Final reflection. Part 3 ending. The Vietnam War was not just about politics or power. It was about people. Young soldiers far from home. Innocent civilians caught in chaos. Families torn apart. It reminds us, war doesn't just end on the battlefield. Part 4. Lessons, Legacy, and Lasting Impact. A war without victory. Unlike previous wars, the Vietnam War had no clear winner for the United States. There was no victory parade, no sense of triumph, no closure for many. For America, it became a symbol of a war fought, but not won. Why America struggled. The United States had advanced weapons, powerful military, strong economy. Yet it struggled against a smaller, less equipped force. Why? Because the war wasn't just military, it was political, cultural, psychological. North Vietnam, led by Ho Chi Minh, had something stronger than weapons: determination, national unity, will to sacrifice. Guerrilla warfare versus modern power. The U.S. military was built for traditional warfare, but in Vietnam, it faced guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, hidden enemies. The Viet Cong used the jungle as cover, civilians as support, surprise as a weapon. This made the war extremely difficult to control. The limits of technology. America relied on bombs, helicopters, chemical weapons, but technology couldn't win. Hearts of the people. Control over rural areas. The war proved technology alone cannot guarantee victory. Political mistakes. U.S. leaders made critical errors, underestimating the enemy, supporting weak South Vietnamese leadership, escalating without clear strategy. Presidents like Lyndon B. Johnson upon Richard Nixon faced impossible decisions, but their choices shaped the war's outcome. The power of public opinion. The Vietnam War showed something new. Public opinion can influence war. Mass protests, media coverage, and events like the Tet Offensive changed how Americans saw the war. People began asking, is this war worth it? Media revolution. This was the first television war. Images of destruction reached millions. The truth could not be hidden. Journalism became a powerful force. Impact on U.S. military strategy. After Vietnam, the U.S. changed how it fights wars. More careful planning, avoiding long ground wars without clear goals. Better understanding of local cultures. The war reshaped military thinking forever. Vietnam after the war. After the fall of Saigon, Vietnam became a unified communist country. But the cost was massive. Destroyed cities, damaged economy, generations affected. Recovery took decades. U.S.-Vietnam relations today. Surprisingly, former enemies became partners. Today, the U.S. and Vietnam have diplomatic relations. Trade and cooperation exist, from war to peace. Cultural memory. The Vietnam War lives on through films, books, music. Movies like Platoon and Apocalypse Now reflect its intensity. Songs captured the emotions of an entire generation. The soldier's legacy. Vietnam veterans were once misunderstood, but today they are honored. Their sacrifice is remembered at places like the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, a place of silence, reflection, and respect. Lessons for the world. The Vietnam War teaches powerful lessons. Understand the enemy. Respect local culture. Avoid unnecessary conflict. Value human life above politics. The emotional truth. Beyond strategy and politics, there were real people. A soldier writing his last letter. A mother waiting for her son. A child running from fire. These stories define the war more than anything else. A divided memory. Even today, opinions differ. Some see it as a necessary fight. Others see it as a tragic mistake. But all agree on one thing. The cost was immense. The silence after the war. When the war ended, there was no celebration. Just silence. A quiet understanding that something had changed forever. The generation that lived it. The Vietnam War shaped an entire generation. Soldiers, protesters, families. It changed how people saw government, war, truth. The war that changed America. After Vietnam, trust in leaders declined. Society became more questioning. People demanded transparency. It marked a turning point in U.S. history. History. Never forgotten. The names on the wall. The stories in books. The memories in hearts. The Vietnam War is never truly over. Final cinematic ending. Imagine this. A quiet black wall. Names carved into stone. A veteran stands still. He touches a name. A friend. A brother. A memory. Tears fall silently. No words are needed, because the Vietnam War was not just history. War may end, but its scars never fade. Thank you for watching this story of the Vietnam War. A story of sacrifice, loss, and humanity. We remember, so we never repeat.